Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on the ToborTech YouTube channel. Today's Java Basics video is about constructors in Java. So let's get started. To start off today's lesson about constructors in Java, let's first talk about what they are conceptually. In the last video of this course, we talked about instance attributes and instance methods. Now, a constructor is just a special type of instance methods that any and all Java classes have, which is called when an instance of the class is created. And that's why this method is called a constructor. It does the constructing of our class instances. Constructors are usually used to initialize instance attributes. Think about the robot class that we used as an example previously. If we want to assign a name to our robots when creating them as a property, as an instance attribute, well, we can't define that information in the class definition because different robots have different names. But because we have a constructor method, which is called every time an instance of the class is created, we can put the initialization of the name instance attribute inside of this constructor method, and we can set this instance attribute to a value passed in as the argument to our constructor. As we continue this lesson, it's important to keep in mind that constructors are just instance methods. They're special though. There are two things that set them apart from the methods that we have written previously. First of all, constructors do not have a return type. Not only can it not return anything, it does not have a return type in the method definition. It does not even have void. It has literally nothing as the return type. And the name of the constructor must match the name of the class, which is how Java can tell whether a method is a constructor or not. So here we have an example program with our robot class. So we have a class called robot, and here we have the constructor, which is the only thing in the class definition. So we have public, and then we have robot. Now notice there is nothing in between these two words. We do not have static, we do not have a return type, and we just have a space. And then robot, this matches the name of our class, robot. And inside this constructor, we print out new robot created. And we have the main class, which makes 3 class instances of the robot class, robot 1, 2, and 3. So we just write new robot parentheses semicolon. Now this is going to implicitly call the constructor, which matches the parameter list. So right now we have nothing passed in, and this constructor has nothing passed in. So we just run this when we create a new instance of the robot class. So if I copy this code into an online Java editor, it should print out new robot created 3 times. And we see the exact output we expect on the right. Because the constructor is called once, every time we construct an instance of the robot class, we get 3 lines of output when our program runs. Now, all classes that you have written so far and all classes you will write will have constructors. If you do not explicitly define one, then Java will do it for you, and it will add essentially an empty constructor to your class that does nothing. But if we want to use a constructor to do things like initialize some instance attributes when creating class instances, we can do something like this. So in this robot class, what we have is we have 3 instance attributes, a string called name, a boolean called canFly, and an int called age. Now these 3 things will be different for every robot. They may not be unique, but at least name should be ideally different for every robot. canFly, well, it can be true or false. Age will be just some number, right? So we can define these in our constructor, and we can initialize these values so that they're different for every robot instance. And that's exactly what we do here. We have public robot, same idea as before, and we pass in 2 parameters. We pass in a string called n and a boolean called f. So we set name to be n. Name is this instance attribute right here, this property of our instance. And n is this thing, this value we pass in when creating this instance. And then we have can fly, which is the instance attribute, Boolean value can fly. And then we have set that to the Boolean variable passed in as the argument, f. Age, we've set it just to 0 for every robot because, when we're constructing a new robot, it should be 0 as the age. And then we have a void returning method called say hi, which prints out some information about our robot instance. So I can copy this code and replace our old robot method with this, or robot class with this. So now when we create a robot object, we need to pass in two values. The first one is the name of our robot, and the second one is whether it can fly. This matches the parameter list of our constructor, so we pass in a string and a boolean. So here we have robot, we have called it robot, is equal to a new robot, and we pass in two values. Firstly, we have a string, that's the name of our robot, duckbot, because why not? And then we have a boolean value called, or not called, it's just a boolean value of false, which is whether the robot instance can fly. In this case, it cannot. And we have robot.sayHi prints out some information, and we have another robot called another robot, and it's a new robot. We call it birdbot, that's the name, and true. And then we increment the age of our birdbot by 1 twice, and then we print out the information here. So let's just take a look at this line. We pass in two values into the parentheses after robot. This is going to be passed into the constructor. So you can think about this placed right below our robot's constructor. Duckbot is N, and false is F. So we're setting name to be duckbot and can fly to be false. So that way, our instance attributes name and can fly will have the values that we pass in here. So let's take a look at if I copy this code into our main class, our main method, what will happen when I run this program. So on the right side, we see, hello, my name is Duckbot and I am 0. Interesting way of introducing yourself. And we have, hello, my name is Birdbot and I am 2. So using our, let's take a look here. So using our constructor, we're able to initialize the values of our declared instance attributes of our robot class. So now that you've learned about constructors, write a Java class that has a constructor as well as instance attributes and methods. Create a few instances of the class with different properties, pass into the constructor. Feel free to make the class a blueprint of anything you can think of. Now this is one class you could have chosen to program in Java. We have a class called Rocket, and this is going to have quite a few instance attributes. It has 6. So we have the name of the rocket, the manufacturer, the number of stages, whether it is manned, whether it is active, and whether the rocket is reusable. And we have a constructor right here. We have 6 parameters passed into the constructor, N, M, S, D, A, and R. Now the name, the instance attribute name, will be set to whatever is passed in as the first argument to our class construction. And the manufacturer is the second, etc. And we print out whatever the name is has been constructed successfully. And then we have the method display information, which is just some information printed out using the instance attributes. And then we have the main class where we construct a rocket called Falcon 9, which is equal to a new rocket. We pass in 6 values, and then we call the display information on this rocket. Same idea with Saturn V here, just different information passed into the construction of our instance. So let me replace this code. Let me put this right here and run this program. So we have Falcon 9 constructed successfully. That is printed out right here on line 16 in the constructor. Rocket name, Falcon 9. Manufacturer, SpaceX, etc. Now, this is obviously not an aerospace engineering class, so take this information with a grain of salt. But the idea here is that we're able to use the constructor to set values, to set the instance attributes with values we specify in the class or in the instance construction. and then we can use it in another method to print out information. In this case, we use display information to access the instance attributes, name, manufacturer, stages, etc. And yeah, so this is an example you could have written for this exercise. Now let's talk about the keyword this. And yes, the keyword is called this. So to eliminate confusion when we're talking about an instance attribute as opposed to a method's parameter, we can use the keyword this to explicitly indicate that we're talking about the instance attribute, the property, instead of a parameter. And this, the word this, when referenced inside of a class, is talking about the current instance of the class. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the constructor again. We have named our parameters really strange and probably not descriptive names. I don't know what D is. I have to look down here and see, oh, is man is equal to D. Now, it's probably more informative if we just write name and manufacturer and num stages and is manned and is active and is reusable. But if you do that, Java is actually going to throw an error because Java doesn't know whether you're talking about name is equal to name. So is this name the parameter, or is this the the instance attribute here? So Java will be confused, so it doesn't know what to do with it. It will throw an error. So what we can do here in this situation is write here, instead of writing name, we can write this dot name. So let me take a look at the code here. So this dot name is equal to name. So we have modified the parameter names, and here we're writing this dot this dot this dot num stages, and so on. This is talking about the current object, the instance of the rocket class that this constructor call is constructing. So the name attribute of the current instance of the rocket class is going to be set to the value passed in as the parameter. And the manufacturer property is set to whatever is passed in here. So that eliminates the confusion of whether we're talking about the instance attribute name or the parameter name right here. And here we have also changed the display information method to use this dot name and this dot manufacturer to explicitly state that we're talking about the instance attribute name, manufacturer, num stages, and so on. We've also added a new method here. Let's take a look at what this method is doing. It's just a method called doc. It does not return anything, and it takes one parameter. It takes a parameter of type rocket, and it's called other. And this is going to just print out this dot name docked with other dot name. So it's printing out the current instance name. The name of the current instance has been docked with the name attribute of the other rocket we pass in here. So in this class, in this main class, we're making this is all the same as before. We're writing falcon9.dock Saturn 5. So we're passing in an instance of the rocket class as other into the dock method. We're passing this in as other. So it's going to print out system.out.println this dot name. So the current instance attribute is going to be falcon9 docked with other dot name. So Saturn 5 dot name. So this should print out falcon9 docked with Saturn 5, which by the way is probably not going to happen. And let me just paste this code in and see what happens. So we have the same things that as we had before up here. The last line, falcon9 docked with Saturn 5. Perfect. So I hope this makes sense as to why we're using this as opposed to not using this. So to summarize, constructors add a layer of convenience in object-oriented programming and is pretty useful when defining classes and creating objects. We can use constructors to initialize the values of instance attributes as to the values we pass in as arguments into our class construction, instance construction. And there you have it, constructors in Java programming. If you found today's video helpful and want to learn more about Java, please consider subscribing to our channel down below. With that said, thank you very much for watching today's video, and we hope to see you in future videos.